Thanks for joining us here on The Key Points. So we have 2.5 hours over one topic, rescuing the economy, following the finance minister's announcement of a raft of measures aimed at rescuing the economy and also improving revenues. Now, many of us waited the entire week in anticipation of what Ken Ofori-Atta had to say. Certainly, it's no secret. Ghana was downgraded by ratings agencies in January, February. The cedi has been the worst performing currency globally, competing with the Russian ruble, which is currently under pressure due to Western sanctions. Now, our debt to GDP ratio is now confirmed at more than 80%. And fuel prices have risen more than 10 times over this quarter 2022. Inflation is at 15% and more, driving up food costs and goods and services. And so the economy is certainly in jeopardy. It's in recognition of this significant decline that Ken Ofori-Atta announced a raft of measures using the expenditure containment approach to restore investor confidence and that of Ghanaians. All of these, we're told, will amount to some 3.5 billion cedis in savings. Now, government's measures will curb government expenditures and improve revenue mobilization and collections. Many measures are already in the budget. However, we know that free SHS remains is non-negotiable in the equation. So also is the electronic payment levy policy, e-levy, which government says it will continue to work to secure approval for in Parliament. But the big question is, will these measures work? And are there measures in there that should not even be considered? That's what we'll be discussing in our review and analysis with our guests this morning. Our guests joining us shortly, Kweku Ricketts-Hagan, former Deputy Minister of Finance, MP for Cape Coast South. We have Dr. Kabir Mahama, our economic policy analyst at the Office of the Vice President, Professor John Kweku-Mensah Mauto, Dean, School of Graduate Studies, UPSA, and Edgar Redu, a finance and insurance analyst. Thanks for joining us. We'll be right back.
Returning to Parliament for e-levy, it's already there, so we're just going to go and continue with the discussion and, God willing, get it passed. I mean, it is in the parliamentary system. So I pray, Parliament rises on April 4th or 5th, maybe. And so we've got some critical, maybe 14 or 15 days to make it happen. And I think after these town hall meetings and understanding what the Ghanaian people want, we should be able to do that. President Akufo-Addo has absolutely no intention to roll back on any major policy like the free SHS. We see education as the best enabler for sustainable economic growth and transformation and social mobility, and we'll do more to improve on it for it to serve more and better our children.
He keeps blaming COVID and everybody, and Ukraine, Russia, and what have you. When he came to Parliament on the 17th of November, after he read the budget, the investor community gave a response. They moved away from the yield on our Euro bonds from 11% to 15%. So Ghana lost market access on the very day he read the budget. It had nothing to do with future agitations over e-levy. E-levy agitation came several weeks later, by which time we had already lost market access. We had been declared a country at risk of debt distress for 3 consecutive years. We didn't have e-levy. So the mismanagement of the economy. Let me tell you why they are going to borrow this $2 billion. It is not to provide forex. As we speak now, government interest payment that is due in the next couple of weeks is in excess of $1.6 billion. And if government does not find that $2 billion, we will default in the payment of our interest cost. So that is the one they are looking for. And they want to throw away this budget in order that they don't default. The overborrowing and the exposure of government to borrowing is bringing about external debt service in excess of 1.6 billion in the next couple of weeks. That is the level of the crisis. I know Dr. Baumia was waiting for this one and some phantom 2 billion so he can now open his mouth.
On Free Senior High School, we've heard that nothing will change about it. We think that there must be a national conversation on the future of education in our country. There must be, because we shudder have cause to believe that we are investing in literacy and numeracy and not human capital. It's only in Ghana that at the basic level everybody passes. That cannot be competitive, and that cannot make our products competitive in the world tomorrow. On the matter of toll booths, we want it reinstated, and we demand that toll booths be made functional and the revenues accruing from it made available for the Republic. They have no business, as if when you have the mandate to govern, you can just do as you please. Nowhere in the world will you travel and you not see functional toll booths. The state have lost significant amount of money arising out of it. We think that it's only proper that is reintroduced and probably adjusted so that we can rake in the needed revenue and use it as a vehicle to promote public-private partnership in the development of our road infrastructure. On the matter of foreign exchange, he was silent on it. All we heard is that some 2 billion cedis will be brought, $2 billion US dollars will be brought in. That is not enough. We need to have a national conversation on how to increase and expand our exports and reduce imports and stop these knee-jerk responses to
And that's the minority leader, Haruna Idrisu there. Earlier you heard Isaac Adongo, who is a member of the Finance Committee in Parliament. So we welcome our guests who join us this morning. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. So let me just quickly go through some of the measures as well, just to recap. Expenditure cutting measures are meant to help government achieve a fiscal deficit of 7.4% of GDP. So discretionary spending is going to be cut by some 10%. Fuel coupon allocations will be cut by 50%. I understand we spend 60 million cedis on fuel coupons. That 50% cut means 30 million cedis. We still need to have a conversation about whether we should continue to be issuing fuel coupons as well, or if we do, whether we should know who is getting what. And then there's a moratorium on the purchase of imported vehicles. This will affect all new orders, especially four-wheel drives. And then government has also imposed a moratorium on foreign travels. Those that will happen will be pre-approved and deemed critical. We will see an elimination of ghost names from the workers' payroll by December 2022. Government will also renegotiate, conclude the renegotiation of the energy sector IPP charges by end of Q3 2022. I know that one of the minority spokesmen on energy, the Honorable Edward Bauer, disagrees. He doesn't believe that there are any charges there that are being paid. Imposing a moratorium on the establishment of new public sector institutions by end April 2022. Prioritize ongoing public projects over new projects. Reduce expenditure on all meetings and conferences by 50%. And then Cabinet approved that ministers and heads of SOEs contribute 30% of their salaries from April to December 2022 to the consolidated fund. And it was reiterated that the Council of State had also set the tone for this by providing a 20% cut in what they get. So those are some of the significant measures. But he also, that's the finance minister, announced fuel price mitigation measures. And in summary, that is 15 pesos per every liter, coming to 60 pesos for every gallon. And a lot of these hit the margins, that is bust margins, the primary distribution margin, the fuel marking margin, and the Unified Petroleum Pricing Fund. Coincidentally, none of government specific taxes were touched, and that's also been a subject for conversation. Now, in addition to that, the finance minister announced revenue measures. Now, he talked about beginning the implementation and collection of revised property rates by the end of April 2022, implementation of the e-VAT, e-commerce, e-gaming initiatives by the end of April 2022, rolling out the simplified tax filing mobile application for all eligible taxpayers by July 2022, impressing upon Parliament to fast-track the passage of the e-levy bill, tax exemptions bills, and fees and charges bills. Government will also partner the private sector to introduce digital systems to monitor quarrying, sand winning, and salt winning to secure more revenues from that, prioritize the revenue assurance, compliance, and enforcement program race to plug revenue leakages at the ports and the infamous fuel bunkering and small-scale mining exporters cabal, in addition to a no duty, no exit policy at the MPS terminal at the Tema port to improve revenue collections. For the Forex market, GOG will conclude external financing arrangement of up to $2 billion in the next 2 to 6 weeks, in line with approved external financing for 2022 for liability management. And the Ministry of Finance will work with the central bank to review the foreign exchange retention policy to ensure multinational companies and the extractive sectors retain foreign exchange earnings from the sale of our resources in country. And this reminds me of a raft of measures announced some time back. I think it was 2013, 2014, by the former finance minister Seth Tekpe, which also related to challenges with the Forex, encouraging or discouraging rather people from pricing in the dollar, encouraging people to price in the CD, as well as undertake all sales in the CD, and also encouraging international companies to stagger any repatriation of foreign exchange funds. And one bit that has been quite of concern for me, weaning off public tertiary institutions from government payroll and provide them with a fixed amount, quote, block grant instead, and pursue reforms to address structural challenges in the public financial management system, including procurement and commitment control, payroll management, and human resource management. So I'll start off with the Honorable Ricketts Hagan. Those are the measures. What for you did you expect? What for you is good? And what for you may not work?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Ifa, and good morning to Prof and Doc. Good morning. And morning to our viewers this morning.
And the good people of Cape Coast South.
Good, of course, that would be the icing on the cake. And good and the great people of Cape Coast South. Chifa, we've been in circles, with our economy for many years. Some of the problems that are confronting us today are problems that we have had for quite some time. Then, of course, things happen, and then we get exposed as a result of, the structure of our economy. Some of the problems that we are facing today are structural issues. I mean, if you look at the exchange rate issue, if you look at our debts and quite a number of indicators, you will realize that the way our economy is structured, it's part of the problem. Then there is the other half of it, which is to do with how you manage, or the management of the economy. And over the last 5 or so years, with the MPP government in office, a lot of, I wouldn't call it mistakes, because obviously these are policies that they believed in. But I think that implementation, and to be fair, some of the policies, are good policies, but they have got the implementation of these policies wrong. And they are not inability per se, but resistant to look at things from other perspective to be able to move forward. I think it's also been part of their problem. The things being blamed on the pandemic and being blamed on the, the geopolitics of Ukraine and Russia, has some merit. But you are only exposed when your fundamentals are not, I think we've heard that before, when your fundamentals are not strong. I keep saying that if you build your house with clay and the storm comes and blows your house, apart, when you get out of what is left, you obviously first going to blame the storm. But when you look around and you realize that your neighbors' buildings are standing, then you begin to blame the materials, upon which your house was built. And that is the problem at the moment, that this government built a lot of things on clay. And at the moment, we have been exposed by the pandemic and obviously the situation happening in Ukraine. So nobody is doubting that there are external shocks that are affecting our economy. But it is how we have prepared ourselves over the years is what is giving us these challenges. The structural issues I talked about, and it's not peculiar to this particular government, is to do with the structure of Ghana's economy. We are pretty much a commodity-based economy. We have gold and all these things that we're blessed with, which we send, for hard currency. Many a times, we don't add any value. Not many a time. We still don't add much value to any of these things that we sent out. We don't control the prices. We don't have, we can't have a shelf value for these things because we can't shelf them. We need to send them out. If you remember years back when our cocoa, was being rotten in the bush, President Rawlings in his, I think, revolutionary days had to organize students to go and carry the cocoa and all that. Because if we hadn't taken the cocoa from the bush, the cocoa was just going to get rotten because we don't process it. So this has been the fundamental problem on the structure side, of our economy. Then, on the other side, it's about our own implementation of policies. One, free education is not, they said it's not negotiable. Well, we will see with time. There is nothing that is not negotiable. As you go along doing something, you have to review it. There's nothing wrong with reviewing things and see whether what you are doing is actually the right thing or not. My challenge or my issue is not with whether we should have free education or not. My issue from the beginning had been to do with the implementation of the free education, and that we did not, it is enshrined in our constitution that, when we can afford, we should have a free, senior high, education. The issue was whether to do it now. The issue was like the independent time, whether we should have independent now or we should have it later. Now we are looking at it in a reverse in terms of probably in terms of our economy. And it's been like, oh, we've got to do it now. Now billions, over 2 billion is being spent on education, yet we are having some serious challenges. We are still on this double track issue. We are still on people not being, the school children not getting the right, meal, books and all these things. Parents are spending more money in getting some of the items for them, yet they have been promised a free education. People are being put in a boarding house, which obviously add to the cost. You can offer a free education without maybe necessarily paying for boarding. People who could pay for themselves are being paid for. So we have subsidies in our education that should not be there to people who don't actually need it. I remember the finance minister himself said that he could afford his children's education. I'm sure all of us here can afford to pay for our children's education. So if you are being forced to have a free education, that is not quality, that is not inadequate, then it becomes problematic. So some of the flagship issues, you go for planting for food, a lot of money so far has been sunk into that area. But then we are not getting the result. It's become a talking shop. You've got to look at the data. I'm glad I have professors and doctors here. If you open the budget and you look at the contribution of agriculture to our GDP, you realize that from 2017, that this government came into office, I think Appendix 1C or something, came into office, the contribution of agriculture to GDP is been declining. I think in next year or this year to the next 2-3 years is going to stagnate at about 5.5%. Yes. Now you ask yourself, if you are sinking this money into this planting for food and for jobs, shouldn't you be able to increase the food production and not have the situation that we have at the moment where we are beginning to have food insecurity, where the bulk of our inflation is actually a food inflation?
Okay, you've now jumped. I wanted you to give me your overview of whether the items the finance minister listed.
So, in a nutshell, what I want to say is that the solution that the finance minister has put forward at the moment is woefully inadequate to address the problem or the challenges that we are having at the moment. And that, instead of throwing the kitchen sink at the problem, he's throwing the pans at the problem. So
when you say, okay, so you've certainly mentioned free SHS. For you, you feel there should have been something done there.
Yes.
He announced that that will not be touched. He didn't talk about the other
planting for food,
the other interventions. We'll come to that. But is there something in there that you would have expected to hear? For instance, I get a sense that a lot of Ghanaians are concerned about revenues, and so they believe that at least road tolls should be reinstated. My colleague who attended that briefing specifically asked the finance minister on 2 occasions. First, she posed the question at the podium. The second time, when she got him one-on-one, she posed the question. She didn't get an answer.
But you see, the road tolls issue has become a bit messy for the government, where you have 2 ministers, one saying that, look, when the budget is approved, we'll do this, and the other one saying that, let's do it now. We don't need the budget to be approved and all that. So it's become a bit of a contentious issue for they themselves, to deal with. But that, for me, is the least of this government's problem.
Okay. Well, you say it's inadequate. What would you have expected to see?
Well, at the moment, as I said, the problem needs to be confronted into. We have a medium or a short to medium term problem, and then we have a long term problem. The long term is the structural issues, which of course is not going to.
We've talked about that we must address.
That we must address. The short term is to how to manage. First of all, we have a fuel prices that are skyrocketing. And then you think about it and you say, okay, how do we address this problem now? Because it is going to have an impact on the economy in terms of growth and the recovery that we are trying to get ourselves, out of the pandemic situation. And you realize that nothing has really been put there, 15 pesos. I think the fuel price is about 10 Ghana cedis per liter or something. 15 pesos is inadequate. And you hear that, oh, Ghana is a net importer of oil. So, we can't do anything. Look, before we had oil, Ghana was a net importer because we didn't produce any oil. And the way the oil revenue works, it's not like one-on-one. They don't put them together because we don't process the fuel here for our consumption. We made an attempt. We were not successful at it. So, basically, the revenues that come from the petroleum side goes into the consolidated fund, and it is not directed purposely to the supply side. So it is for general things. What some of us are proposing is that, look, whether you are a net importer or a net exporter, just take a simple if you are a net importer, so it means that you bring in, let's say 70, just for argument's sake, you bring in 70, okay, and then you export 50. So net importer of 20. Now, you stated in your budget that crude prices are going to be around $60. Let's say 60 for argument's sake. Prices are around 100. So you have a differential of about 40. For some simplistic argument, no complication, look at it that your cost is gone up by, let's say, 40. But also, because you export, you also have another 40 on the other side. So if you net off a cost which you did not anticipate against a cost, against a revenue which you also did not anticipate, your position still remains the same. So let's say you have 40 coming in, 40 going out. If you net that 40 out, you are still a net importer, but your price actually hasn't changed. But the way we do it at the moment, the revenue from the oil goes into the consolidated and does other things other than looking at oil. We have built the taxes on the petroleum in our budget. It's part of the revenue. So I can understand, having had an opportunity, I don't know whether it was an opportunity, of course, an opportunity.
You've been at the finance ministry, so you know what it is.
The challenges that are there. So this, for me, and then, of course, you come to the other thing which is also problematic, that's the exchange you have talked about. It's also a structural problem, need to be addressed. At the moment, the central bank is like watching a paint dry. Like you paint a wall and you sit there and watch it dry. They basically don't have the tools to address the currency problem because the reserves are not strong enough. We have about 3 or 4 months import cover or something. Look, the reserve does a lot of things. If you look at it in practical terms, the reserve supporting import cover, the reserve support external component of our debt. And then other things that they use the reserve for in the past. When we were in good standing in the capital market, meaning when we had not been downgraded, we could go to a capital market. We could go and do this Eurobond. Last year we did 3 billion, we put it there, so we were able to strengthen it and signal to the market that we have the tools to deal with it. At the moment, we don't. If the central bank pushes itself to use the basic economics of trying to use hard currency to deal with the currency problem, we might find ourselves wanted. We are lucky that we are a country where we don't have speculators. Because if people were to target our city, we would be blown out of the market in no time.
Okay.
So the 2 billion they're going to look for, I guess that's what they're going to use the 2 billion for.
But that's still money we are borrowing.
That's not where the problem is.
Okay. So
money we are borrowing at a commercial rate. This is where the argument of you may hate the IMF, you may disagree with the IMF. This is where the argument comes.
An IMF support will not come at a commercial rate. Will be
concessionary.
Okay.
It will not be. So if you need 2 billion, you are talking about not being able to. You are not IMF will go to put restrictions. You can't recruit. You have 600,000 to 700,000 people working.
Okay, that's just one thing that is always mentioned as a condition.
But you see, the problem has always been, we've been to IMF 16 times, they say. Okay, the problem is that when we go there and do all the IMF policies are usually, contractionary, fiscal consolidation, to put in the discipline so that you don't, reckless spending and all that. When we come out of it, we begin to do the opposite. Okay. We have done that 16 times. Okay, so that's why we are still where we are.
Okay, so just hold on there. Let me bring in Dr. Mahama, who is the economic policy advisor at the Office of the President. So you've heard Dr. Ricketts Hagan. I saw that you were writing, so I won't ask you any question. Just go ahead and address what you'd like to address.
Thank you very much, and I'll say good morning to you and to your viewers. I must say that first and foremost, the President has acknowledged that times are not easy for Ghanaians, and the first task of leadership is to first and foremost acknowledge the problem. Don't sweep the problems under the carpet. Once you acknowledge them and let the citizen understand that we do have a problem, I think that they will rally behind you to solving it. How did we get here? It's an important question that needs to be asked.
I think we all know how we got here. I think the question we want, or the answer we want from you, are some of the issues Honorable Ricketts Hagan raised.
Yeah, I will come to address those particular questions, but I have to give you the foundation upon which you would be able to appreciate the explanation, the answers I'm going to give you. The problem with this particular country is that we take issues on the surface and we run to town with them. And when we do that, we are lost in the forest of issues that we are not able to even pick out which one is the tree that is a solution to our problem. And that is the problem whenever we have this discourse about discussion of the economy. That is what we have. This government did not run this particular economy to the abyss. In the last 5 years, between 2017 and 2019, we grew the economy by an average of 7%. Interest rate came down from 23% to as low as, from 35% to as low as 23%. The Bank of Ghana reduced the policy rate consistently. We did not get here. We successfully implemented free scenarios. So all this have to be put in context. But we know that COVID came. People say it's a rescue. But I've always told people that give me your prototype of a country that has survived, that was doing well in COVID. Then I'll be humble enough to accept that Ghana is seeking refuge in a case that is non-existent. I've always said, your model, your prototype of country, Western, Middle, Asia, give me a prototype of a country that has survived COVID and that is doing perfectly well. Then I'll be humble enough to say that COVID is not the issue. We agree that COVID is an issue. Then let's come to Russia, Ukraine. Give me a country that has not felt the brunt of the Russia-Ukrainian war.
I don't think we should even be talking about Russia-Ukraine. This happened just a month ago.
I'm coming, but you see, the economic system, the transmission of economic mechanism is such a way that if one is just like the human body, if you have a problem with the head, the whole system is going to be affected. While we have our 2.5% of our trade, export, import with Russia and Ukraine, and we think that it will not heighten the pressure. The pressure also heightened in February to March. All these discussions we are having, they became heightened within this particular period. So when we are talking about the economy, when we are making reference to them, we should also be humble enough to say that, you see what, we are discussing this issue because the problem has been heightened. Why is it heightened? This is the, Russia-Ukraine war is the reason why it's heightened.
But with all due respect, Dr. Mahama, inflation was already at 13% as of December 2021. The Ghana Statistical Service indicated that was the highest level of inflation that had been experienced. By that time, there was no Ukraine.
Of course, there was
By
pandemic.
that time, fuel prices had already gone up, some 5-6 times?
Of course. So, that's the simple economy. If fuel prices are going up, fuel prices are going up. You expect...
So maybe the point I'm trying to put to you is the issues relating to Russia-Ukraine are latter-day saints. We've had significant issue. All right, the government has said COVID was a major factor. Okay, we'll stick to that. But then food prices have been going up for a long time. We've had planting for food and jobs. We've seen that beyond everything government says it's been doing, the currency has been suffering since last year. Things really came to a head this year because of the downgrades. So I'm just trying to say that let's not bring in Russia-Ukraine yet. There are lots of challenges the economy was suffering. It was being raised long before Russia-Ukraine came.
Of course, I've given you, about 2 issues.
Okay.
And to dive and delve into only Ukraine is to pick one issue out of the many issues I'll be raising.
All right.
So that is the point I need to stress, that we cannot discount and we should not attempt to wither down the effect of that particular crisis we are experiencing. It's not only Ghana. And I'm putting the challenge to anyone out there. If you have a prototype of a country that was even doing well, even the time you've mentioned, before the same period last year, we have appreciation of the cedi. The same period we are experiencing January to March in 2021, we have an appreciation of the cedi. So, but when it came, of course, credit will not be given to the government.
But it was a minimal raise. So anyway, but Dr. Kam, I think fundamentally, talk to me about the finance minister's
so the
measures.
finance minister, that's what the president first of all came out with some of the 4 measures. First, the BOG coming out with the policy rate, raising it to what they call the 17%. You need to understand that this is one of the direct intervention to addressing the currency issue. Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, have gone to increase their interest rate. UK is following suit, Germany as well, because once they are having a crisis, the only way to respond to it is to make sure that the value of their currency is upgraded. And one way of doing that is to raise the interest rate so that there will be incentive to invest in your currency. Simple as that. So that's what all governments have been doing. And the president, in collaboration with the BOG, took that first decision. It's one of the direct measures we intend to use to address the challenge of the currency. The president also announced the issue of a 30% cut in the salaries of his ministers and then head of SOEs. This, I've always maintained that it's not a solution to the problem, but it's an acknowledgement of the president that we are in difficult times. We want to rally the country. Measures we are taking are equally affected us. So I've always said it has a signaling effect of the people to follow suit. The other measure is the BOG 2 billion reserves being pumped into the country. Of course, the currency issue is a demand and supply issue. Once you have demand exceeding supply, you are bound to have the CD depreciating in value. So with that, we believe that, and once the BOG introduced, we've seen that, you in your synopsis and your this have actually acknowledged that the CD value is now appreciating, following some of those particular measures the government has undertaken.
That's true. That was as of Thursday and Friday. Yeah. I acknowledge that.
Also, the last one is the opening of the borders, as mentioned by the president. This is supposed to sow up economic activity, because if you have an economy that is probably in distress, probably because trade services and goods are not actually being exchanged. So therefore, you expect people to be in a bit of difficulty. With closure of borders, I've visited the Afloa border and I've seen the difficulty, traders have to go through, people have to even smuggle because their livelihood is at stake. These were the first measures the president outlined. But the finance minister came to consolidate these particular measures that the president outlined by focusing on 1, 2. We want to maintain our fiscal deficit, our fiscal deficit at 7.4% of GDP. Why do we need to do that? We will want to maintain confidence in the economy so that investors will be willing, will not want to spend more than we have. That is one of the reasons why the president or the finance minister is consistent and has been signaling and is very committed to ensuring that we have the 7.4% benchmark. Remember, before even the COVID started, we had achieved the Fiscal Responsibility Act provision of less than 5% consistently for 3 years. But things changed and we had to do over 11% last year. And this year, the government is trying to bring that down. The other measure the finance minister made, basically they are expenditure containment and revenue enhancement measures. So expenditure containment measure, one of which, you've outlined all of them. The major one I want to pick out, single out, and disagree with Edward Bauer is the energy sector.
Edward Bauer disputes that there are payments being made to IPPs on that, because he says that what are we paying for? It's not been accounted for.
There is a legacy debt in the IPP of over $900 million. Aside that, we are paying close to $300 or so million for excess capacity. As of 2019, our installed capacity was over 5,000.
So are you able to tell us how much we've paid and how much is outstanding?
I'm not able to give you figures. I'm not able to give you figures that outstanding debt for any IPP. But I know that the measures we are taking to rationalize the payment of the energy sector on the lower band is going to yield $12 billion of savings to the country at the lowest, because with the conversion of the PPAs, that power purchase agreement, to energy conversion agreement, that was, and also the tolling framework that the finance minister mentioned. This discussion, 6 IPPs have agreed to this renegotiation. Like I mentioned of AXA, Senate, Sen Energy, we have also Early Power. All these particular 6 IPPs have agreed, independent power producers have agreed to this particular negotiation, and government is going to rake in a lot of savings from that. We've also talked about the government with the Controller and Accountant General trying to rationalize the payroll, linking people's data to the Ghana ID card. That single unique identifier of a Ghanaian will help the country to save also revenue. The president, the finance minister also mentioned issue about moratorium on purchases of new vehicle. That is a very good measure. You mentioned some of the figures. About 50% of that particular budget line, discretionary spending is going to be reduced by 10%. The government has also mentioned that foreign travels is going to be banned unless, of course, they are extremely necessary.
Okay, so similar, the president announced these, I remember, in the first year of his first term, and we heard that later on people were bringing in vehicles on the back end, and so there are concerns that yes, we are being told this, but we are not sure if it will really happen. We'll come back to that, but let me just let everyone know that we are joined by Edgar Redu. He is a financial and insurance analyst as well. He joins us on Zoom. Let me just take some initial points from him as well as he joins us. Good morning to you, Mr. Redu, and thank you very much for joining us. First, your impressions on the measures announced by the finance minister on Thursday.
Well, panelists there. I have serious problems with what the finance minister did because you see, all this things stems from the fact that when the fuel prices were going high on the market, and then the problems we have with our currency, issues relating to high cost of living, especially food and services. One of the problems that, or should I say the main problem that Ghanaians had was that government should come up with some intervention. The intervention Ghanaians were looking for was that, look, government, are you going to say that we will not allow fuel prices to go beyond 8 cedis? So what is going to happen is that if it goes beyond 8 cedis, whatever the excesses are, governments, we will take it. This is the picture or the mindset that Ghanaians had, for which they were expecting the president to speak. Now, we heard of the immediate cabinet retreat, and these were some of the issues that Ghanaians were expecting to hear, in the sense that if government had made budgets for certain things, probably some of those items could be shelved, and the monies allocated for that will be used to cushion the problems that they are facing so far as the hike in fuel prices is, going on, because it affects everything. For some reason, the expectation was dashed, because if you read all that the finance minister came to say, the finance minister is saying that all the measures they have taken is not to cushion the Ghanaian, but to ensure that there are 7.4% deficits. If you go through the document, and in fact, if you have the document there, right, you could go through it and you see that, how do you call it? All these measures that have been announced, reduction of this, reduction, I think number 24 of the statement is that all these measures are aimed at ensuring that we achieve the 7.4% deficit target set in the 2022 budget. So it has nothing to do with how the ordinary man is suffering.
But Mr. Redu, the finance minister announced some relief on fuel prices, 60 pesos per litre. It may seem small, but that's something. government officials are supposed to also burden share. So they're supposed to cede 30% of their salary. We're going to see that they will not travel as much as they were traveling. They're not going to be buying new four-wheel drives on a whim. Don't those things also demonstrate that at least they're also sharing some of the burden?
Eva, I said, the finance minister indicated clearly that all that he came to do is to make sure that they get the 7.4% deficit. And as I said, I've quoted it here. When you look at the number 24 of the statement, and in fact, the reduction in XYZ, the reduction in all these things is clearly because their expected revenue. For instance, if Parliament had not created problems for them in terms of the e-levy, if Parliament had gone ahead to pass it, if Parliament had gone ahead to the fees and charges, whatever, the exemption bill, if Parliament had gone to pass it, these reductions would not come. That because they are not getting the required revenue, they'd have to do some cuttings such that they will hit their 7.4%. It is not about how the ordinary man is suffering on the streets.
Aren't you being unfair by hinging this to that line 20, that point 24 in the budget? Because the other option also would have been to go to the IMF, and we all know what that means.
I don't think the other option would have been to go to the IMF. Not at all. You see, first of all, we need to understand a few things. For a developing country, you don't rely on taxes to develop your country. And you must know the difference between revenue mobilization and revenue generation. When you are talking about revenue mobilization, you're talking about the taxes. Yes. So mobilize the taxes and make sure that the government machinery or the state machinery is running, right? Because yes, we need the security services, we need the auxiliary, we need the judiciary, we need education, we need the health, we need all these public service structures to work. So you use your taxes to make sure that you maintain them. You are a developing country with, how would I call it, a super, extra large amorphous informal sector. Maybe the vice president will give him credit for that. He has started something we should have done yesterday, but better late than never. So what the vice president is doing, this digital business and what have you, maybe gradually we will get there. But when you have a system that is so amorphous, we continue talking about the tax bed. Let's be honest with ourselves. How do you identify the tax of how many over whatever percentage of workers in the informal sector? How do you determine the salaries of the hairdresser? How do you determine the salary of the cocoa woman, the watch seller, the what? Name them. How can you determine salary and say that they're going to pay a tax? Until you structure your system in a certain way. That is the only when you can say that, okay, you have a certain idea. So maybe even if it's a flat rate or something, then you do that. But until you get there, you do not depend on taxes to do everything for yourself.
Now, Mr. Redu, okay, let me ask, what's your view about the electronic levy? Because I've been looking at the recent figures of performance. There's been a slight dip since the policy was announced last October. I think we are seeing something like 73 billion that has been running through in transactions. That's a lot of money. And certainly there are e-commerce, there are, businesses operating online who are part of that whole transaction. What do you want government to do about that? They should let that amount go, or they should at least tap into it?
Before I come to address that issue, I want to look at the issue of the road levy or the road tax or whatever.
The road toll?
The road toll.
Do you want it to come back?
It should not have been abolished in the first place. Look, today, all the roads that the government did, right? All the roads that the government did, try to resurface them, try to improve upon them, upgrade the new ones, they are all getting bad. As you drive along the roads, you see small cracks coming here, potholes coming here, X, Y, Z. Take a ride on the Kanda Highway and see the kind of potholes that are coming in there. When you look at Achimota, this area, at times, I see this, how do you call them? Extra large articulator trucks going to Burkina Faso. You see the load they are carrying. The other day, one of them even went to chip off one of the concrete at the Achimota area there. What happened to him? He walked away. Our roads are getting bad by the day. We are the same people who come back and complain because it is going to destroy our vehicles. Movement will be slow, movement here and there will be. I mean, there was no business in taking away the road tolls at all. Because today, no maintenance is taking place. Since the beginning of the year to this time, maintenance is not happening anywhere. And the roads are getting bad by the day. When the rains come, they go down there and then begin to destroy the asphalt. So that's one here. Now, talking about the e-levy. My understanding is that the e-levy was supposed to generate something about, let's say, 7 billion. Is that all Ghana needs to solve its problems? 7 billion. So you're talking about $1 billion. Is that all we need to solve our problem in this country? We can do better. You know, we can do better than we're doing. The problem we have is this. We always sit down and allow some white man to conjecture and put certain things on paper for us to think that that is the only way out and you want to follow it. Come home, think, look at your own environment, look at the peculiar situation in your environment. Yes, you can use that as a guide. And in using that as a guide, you see how your system is. And then you see how you can manage through it, such that you don't have a problem. That is why, for instance, someone comes and tells you that the IMF will give you conditions that, if you go to a chief's palace, you don't have to pay cola. But that is our tradition. You know, the tradition is that if you are going to see the chief, pay the cola. Right? Our tradition is like that when you go out there, if there's a funeral, because somebody has spent an establishment is going for a funeral, the company may have to do some donations or whatever. That is our system. You should understand the peculiar nature of your system and see how what they prescribe in their textbooks, okay, works well for you. So you don't say you carry the whole thing. So, for instance, Bank of Ghana comes and says that he's doing a contractionary fiscal, policy, monetary something. It's another form of a tax, because the thing that you're doing is this: as you have hiked those 17% rate, you should understand that the nature of the Ghanaian economy is hard cash transaction.
Okay, so you say that we must look at what works for our system, but does that mean that we need a sort of e-levy, only that it must be tailored for our system?
That is what I'm saying, that if you want to depend on taxes alone to develop the system, that is the kind of problems you get, because you see, you are not using your brains. You are not seeing the opportunities that are out there that you can make good money. Okay, let me just chip you out here small. You see, the whole Ghanaian system itself, there is a bigger problem. One of it is issues relating to greed, issues relating to, unnecessary political interferences and what have you, because you need to, as it were, satisfy your sponsors, those who help you come to power. If we are supposed to be so strong, the political will that you want Ghana to work, we would have been far gone where we are today. We wouldn't be here. We would have far gone. One typical thing that we are talking about, look at it. Why should you have a business? And in the minister's statement, he's talking about Ghanaians trying to be patriotic or trying to consume their own and doing what have you. All this, that yes, let's try and encourage ourselves. But the thing is that what are we producing to encourage ourselves to participate? What is the essence of having, here I sit with you, I'm talking to Zoom. What is the essence of having conferences and seminars for which you want to spend so much money on just to go and drink tea and Margaritas, biscuit products.
Okay, Mr. Redu, organizing a conference, I guess, is more than refreshments. So, but the point is, if a workshop should not be organized, then it should not be. So I think the agencies have to prioritize that.
I never said so. I said, I am speaking with you through Zoom. Whatever conferences or seminars you want to have, you can have it now that we have all the electronic things available. You don't need to assemble people at places. We can have whatever conversation you want to have, for which you have to say that because you are inviting some chiefs and whatnot from some places, you go and hire hotels for them to go and sleep in the hotels. It is all part of it. And you feed them and you do all that. It's totally unnecessary.
All right. All right. Let me hold you there for the moment, and I'll come back to you. So, Professor Mauto, what for you jumps out in the finance minister's statement?
All right. Thank you, Jifa. And good morning to my good friend, Mr. Redu. I think we used to meet here often. And let me also admit that Honorable spoke very well, and I did not feel that sense of partisan, submission. I mean, you were very fair to your point. The whole of this week, right? I think the whole of this week, I had issues with submissions from the minority, especially when it comes to the reality. Yeah, and then my good friend also have submitted, but you should be just admit that politicians, when they are speaking, they'll surely espouse their political ideologies. But Jifa, it's instructive, and it's also fair to say that these measures, to me, should have been instituted about a year or two ago. I mean, these are not measures that will probably bring in any serious savings, okay? They are
3.5 billion CDs is the savings.
They are day-to-day operational measures you introduce whenever you realize that there's a problem, there's a shortage. Okay, there are companies in this country, immediately the system went to a halt. For a country where we have, people going home for 6 months. Some institutions were closed down for 6 months. Your tourist industry was down, and revenue had diminished so much. You have no option than to reduce your costs. And this should have happened about 2 years ago. Now, let's look at the items one by one. Some of them had been announced, there were instructions to that effect. For instance, travels. It's the first time of hearing the president say that, look, let's minimize travel. And there were instructions that government officials are not supposed to travel within this period. The issues about discipline, were they complied with? And it's back again hitting us so hard. There were issues of domestic consumption. Jifa, you see, countries thrive on consumption. In our part of the world, whenever we increase consumption, it hits our economic indicators so hard. But it is rather supposed to improve on our economic performance. That is why in the US, I always say, in the US, when they were facing, or they were being hit by the pandemic, the economic effect of pandemic, the US government put money into the pocket of its citizens to consume so that their factories will now have sales booming. But when you do same in Ghana, then you are rather trying to boost the economic activities of other countries. That is the economic conditions we've been able to put in place for the past years. As a country, we have not been able to create a sustainable macroeconomic indicator, macroeconomic environment such that we have a resilient economy to withstand any economic shock. Look, Jifa, in our economy, you cannot, if you can track it, you cannot have a sustainable economic performance for more than 5 years. It is either impacted by an endemic issue or either epidemic or pandemic. I'm talking about not medical, framework. economic pandemic, economic epidemic, or economic endemic. If it's Ghana,
or elections
related.
Elections.
Elections endemic.
Elections.
So every 4 years, every 4 years, we're going to have economic endemic in this country.
Elections is a major.
Yes, every 4
elections
years.
is a major
These
time
two
when we
parties
see a lot of
overspend their
dislocation.
budget every 4 years. So you see, so we've not been able to build a sustainable economic environment for this country. That is the major issue.
All right, so you said that these measures should have been introduced a year ago.
Oh,
They've
yeah.
not. They've been introduced or announced now.
Yeah.
Do you think they'll work?
It depends on the will of those in charge. Okay, look, some of us sat here 2 years ago and mentioned that you have been able to attract companies. Vehicle assembling companies in this country. The automobiles came into this country. What do you do to sustain their existence? You need to consume their products. And we know the government is the highest spender in this country. So what policy did we put in place? So you see, this was long overdue. That let's instruct our government agencies to buy locally assembled vehicles, irrespective of their cost. At least you are not improving the economic activities of other countries. Even if we have...
You are not paying freight at the ports.
Thank you. Even if we have foreign components, which is sure, in this country, the domestic participation when it comes to huge investment is minimal, because most of these companies are established by foreign investment. And for that matter, at the end of every year, you have huge capital flying out of this country. So the only good news is that once we have domestic automobiles here, companies here, what it means is that some of the monies will be retained here. We have employees being paid. Are you okay? These are just a matter of policy. That look, henceforth, any vehicle you want to buy, fall on our companies in there, because it's a public money, the taxpayers' money. Use it here, spend it here. The US...
Don't you have... I'll come back to Dr. Kabir after we take a break. But what about the fuel coupons? There is a view that we spend 60 million a year on fuel coupons, that should not even happen. Maybe just a select few of people should have fuel coupons. All appointees, they should buy their own fuel.
Chifa.
We pay salaries, and there is also a view that even with these cuts, they will not be significantly affected. Their allowances and the like will continue to shore them up. What are your thoughts on fuel coupon?
A directive to even mobilize a minutest fund is productive.
So the 50% is a good start.
What I want to say is, I see, we need to take, review. I want to resonate with Honorable that, look, for every policy, there's always the need to subject your policy to peer review in order to ascertain whether what we plan to do has been achieved. If today we are still giving fuel coupons, which we all know, people have really exploited this particular provision, and it's becoming a waste to the government, especially, I don't know about you, let me give a classical, example.
I'm told the MPs buy their own fuel, but I doubt that is with the leadership. I doubt that because the leadership, they have their own packs.
It is not just about even the executive. So we are talking about even state-owned enterprises. They are leaders. Sometimes you go to a program with a deputy minister or some CEO of a state-owned enterprise. When you close, and probably in a chat, the driver of that deputy minister or CEO is seated in the car with the AC on, with the engine on, and then the security man is guiding the car. That is waste. What is the security about this? And it's not once, it's not twice. Even in the studio, I have engaged a number of our colleagues here. Before the program, their engines are on. Jifa, are you sure that if they were to use their own money? No, what is the security implication when you have a policeman guiding your car and your driver sitting in an air-conditioned car and with the engine on. These are wastes. No, we don't need to get here for the Minister of Finance to tell the agencies of government to minimize it. It should be an instruction. And you see, Jifa, you seem to always, your questions always comes with solution. You know why? If some of these were part of their conditions, they will not waste it.
All right,
they wouldn't waste the Ghanaian taxpayers' money putting on their engines, okay? If you it would come from a salary, you wouldn't do, I know you don't do that. I don't mean you. Probably you need to confess that you do it. You know?
So certainly the expenses on fuel is an issue. Let's take some text messages that have come through. We'll take a break and we'll come back. This one from AU Farouk in Tamale says, good morning. I'm very sad the finance minister also attributes the challenges in the economy to COVID-19 and the war in Russia and Ukraine. This is not the right way to analyze our economic problems. This one from Musa Abattoir in Kumasi. There's no clear indication that the economy will be revived because the fiscal measures announced by the finance minister seem to just be a populist approach in dealing with the current economic meltdown they created. Government is borrowing an additional $2 billion to pay interest of $1.6 billion on bonds after all the financial players had advised government to put a cap on borrowing. Hitherto, we should expect more hardship in the coming days. Abdul Basit Zongo from Kumasi, congratulations to the Black Stars. Well, they drew. The economic measures in place will surely make Ghana the best, and the economy is bouncing back again. This one says, thank you, Jifa. Says, this one from Salamanu Faris. You see, the NDC has no solution to our current situation because a former finance minister has been given an opportunity to address this national problem, and he is giving us propagandist answers. We will challenge them on that. So, Honorable Rikitega, you have to come back again. This message says, in November, the budget promised a deficit of 7.5%. In January, the finance minister promised a 20% cut in budget, which should wipe out the deficit. Yesterday, he promised a further 10% cut in discretionary expenditure and a 30% cut in pay for government appointees. How come the budget deficit still remains at 7.5%? Dr. Kabir will take that for us. But just know that with these additional cuts, all it means is that the problem is bigger than we see it. Koshi Badohun writes, now we are blaming the war in Ukraine. This may not be true because the economy was already downgraded long before the Ukraine war. Our economic indices were heading for the worst before these crises. What happened to the robust economy we were promised? And another message from David Adu. The messages were incoherent, and I don't think they will lead to any substantial improvement in Ghana's economy. And a final one from Suleiman Adamba says, what a brilliant submission by Dr. Kabiru. I think that's one of your fans. It's a clear indication that the president has a solid economic management team being headed by the vice president, Dr. Mahamadou Bawumia. We take a quick break. We'll be right back. Thank you very much for staying with us here on The Key Points, and you are welcome back. So let me come to Dr. Ricketts Hagan. So Dr. Ricketts Hagan, sorry, I beg your pardon. I'm being engulfed by the doctors and the professors. So Honorable Ricketts Hagan, the toll booths should return, do you think, the road tolls?
Well, the toll booth shouldn't have gone at all in the first place. So yes. You know, it shouldn't have. It doesn't really make any sense to me. Yes, might not be a lot of money, but it was something that
it was consistent.
Yes, you were coming for more taxes like the e-levies and all that. The ones that you have already negotiated and collected, you come and cancel them. You know, for what? Because you thought you get the e-levies and then you are using that one to appease people and then get the e-levy. It just doesn't make sense. And then even the manner in which it was done. The budget had not been approved. The minister just went out, and then. Okay,
but that ship has sailed. What would be?
Well, it's a financial loss to the state. It hasn't sailed yet. It will come back.
Can it be reinstated? Does it
Well,
have
why
to
not?
come back to
the
Parliament?
The finance minister has powers to, do, anything that has been mandated by the president to do, as, with regards to the finances and the economics of this country. So he can do, but the problem is that, and I agree with Prof, they do too little, too late. At the moment, as I said, what I'm looking at the moment, there is real danger that a lot of things are going to come to a halt. Because, look, you put in 2 billion and then what? You know how long that 2 billion is going to take, how it's going to impact on the exchange rate, and if you continue to have the external shocks that you are getting, which you don't have, what is it called? You don't know when they are going to end. Then what is your next step? Another 2 billion commercial, you're going to add to your debt. The debt is now 362 billion. When you add all these ESLA and other things, at the end of last year, it was, if you add the last quarter, 51 billion. That's 80% of GDP. Okay? And then you ask yourself, what's all this money been used for? Flagship programs that sound good, but the implementation is always problematic. Then you have, we don't usually look at what the central bank is doing, because to fix the economy is about fiscal and monetary. Many a times, the central bank also mistime things and also do too little, too late, or too much for what they shouldn't have done. Even if you look at what they've done at the moment, 250 basis points and all that, you just ask yourself, do we really understand the economy that we are running? The inflation that they are targeting, which is their job. What sort of inflation do we have? The inflation we have is food inflation, mainly, the high fuel prices inflation, and then the inflation that comes from the exchange rate. Is this inflation a permanent inflation, or is it a transitory inflation? Is it a pass-through inflation? The inflation from the fuel is a pass-through. Whenever geopolitics over there stops, things might reverse a bit. The exchange rate itself also might be. So if you go and do, boom, 250 basis point, the demand, the inflation you are experiencing is more of a supply and cost side inflation. It is not demand driven. Demand in your economy. So in as much as basic economics will tell you that you can use a monetary tool, which is the exchange rate, to try and reduce the overheating in the system by maybe pulling money out of the system and all that. What money are you pulling out of the system? It's not a demand-based money. It is money coming from this supply side. So the other side of the coin, and we don't look at the full picture. This government doesn't.
Okay, but the government...
The other side of the coin is that you are recovering. Then you put on 250 basis points, because Americans did a 25 basis point. Okay? And they have indicated that they may do 7 of them. So they are basically doing this progressively. You go and do 250 because your inflation has reached 15.7 without actually analyzing where the inflation itself is coming from. So you do the 250 basis point. What you have done is you have increased cost of borrowing. So it becomes expensive for people who should take money to invest in the economy to do so, to create the jobs that you need. So in the end, it might affect your growth, and the recovery you are looking for, you might not get it. Could we have done?
But there's also the revenue mobilization measures.
Well,
the government announced the property rate taxes. They announced a capping.
To be honest with you, some of the small measures, they are not small. These are part of structural problems.
The property rate.
Yes.
Thing. That one, they should push it.
Yes, it's a structural problem that we need to deal with. So those are fine. If you look at the e-levy, and I have always, our position is that we are against the e-levy. We are not for the e-levy.
I got a sense, just a quick one on the e-levy. I got a sense from the finance minister that he is seeking reconciliation. He is seeking cooperation from the minority. Will the minority back down? Because it was pointed out to the finance minister that Parliament will soon go on recess for the Easter break. Will the e-levy be passed by then? You are on the finance committee.
Again, the approach of how this whole e-levy thing went it's not been really great. Now they've gone back and try and, repair things as I come along. But as I said, the position of us in the minority is that no e-levy. But if I look at it from a different lens, which is from a finance perspective, the structure of our economy again has changed. We have moved from the traditional economy to more a digital economy. So we've got to look at how we can be able to get revenue from that digital economy. Is that to be e-levy? My answer is no. There's much bigger fish to catch on the digitalization side of the economy that we've not been able to.
Can you give an example?
E-levy, well, e-commerce, the whole e-commerce business itself is huge. And we've got to zoom in there and look at how we can, there are people sitting in their bedroom doing businesses. They don't even go out of their doors and earn money with technology. And nobody's tracking them.
In their car boots.
Yes.
In their halls.
Then we are after e-levy, which is basically a low-hanging fruit for the Ministry of Finance or for GRA. And it's going after people who are basically, a significant amount of our people did not have formal bank savings. This e-levy has become a form of a savings with all this wallet. People collect money, loans to do their business, either roasting plantains or whatever. These are the people we are taxing in the end. I mean, how many of us,
How can we target the e-commerce space? Because that's what the Vice President has been working on his digitalization campaign and drive.
He's been doing a lot in that area, though I would have preferred it if he had stayed on basically fixing the economy. But it is an integral part of moving us beyond where we are. We've got to understand the modern country that we live in, or the modern economy that we live in. And then all these things comes in. But you can't abandon one and go and do the other. It must be done. And that's why we're calling for him. We are not against his doing the digitalization, but please come and take the economy along, as you have, told us in the past. And now we're looking for you, and you are found wanted. Let me quickly touch on some of the things that they've come up with. I told you earlier on, instead of throwing the kitchen sink. Sorry.
They are throwing pans.
They are throwing pans. And I think Prof put it, that it's all about doing too little too late.
Okay, but we shouldn't dwell on that. I think
we should dwell on that.
The measures have come. Let's see how it will work. Because I, for one, instituting these measures just for the rest of this year is inadequate. I think these should be measures that must continue until 2024.
That is it.
Yes. Some must continue. But the gimmickal ones should be stopped. It doesn't make any sense. You're trying to give the impression that you are doing something, you are sacrificing. Who is sacrificing here? The executives? I've been an executive before. Which sacrifice are you doing with the 30% that you are talking about? Look, let me give you some numbers here. We have 261 MMDAs. Okay, so all of them have chief executives. They are government appointees. You have 126 SOEs. They all have chief executives. You have ministers and deputy ministers. Let's say each ministry, about 30 ministries, each one minister, some have two. So you average it about 60. Then you have regional ministers. These are 16 regions. You put all of them together, about 463 years. So let's round it up to 500. Okay? So average salary of the executive is about 180,000 a year. If you do the numbers, that's total salary of about 90 million. 30% of it is 27 million. Jifa, do you know that the money we are going to borrow, the 2 billion in the next 2 to 6 weeks, the 2 billion actually translates to 15 billion. That is, if you use an exchange rate of about 7.6. Now, let's look at how we service our debt. The interest payment, let's forget about the amortization, the arrears. We are going to spend 37 billion this year on interest payment. That translates to 3.1 billion every month that this country pays. If you want to go break it further down, that's 103 million that we pay every single day. This country pays 103 million. And you say you are collecting 27 million. That 27 million will be about a fourth. This is the whole annual money, the 30%. It's about a fourth of the interest payment that we pay in a day. That is the drop in the ocean.
Should it have been half?
Well, you can't do that. So what I'm telling you, that these are not the areas you should be looking for.
Okay.
You know, it's just a gimmick. And then these people we are talking about, the executives, especially the CEOs and all that, they live in government bungalows, they drive government cars, they don't pay electricity, they don't pay water, you know, the fridges in the house and the office are all stocked. What are we talking about? The cars they are talking about that they shouldn't buy, they bought all the cars already. How many cars are they going to buy? They should tell us how many cars that are in the pipe works that they are going to buy this year, and tell us how much savings we are making out of that. All the cars were bought when people were appointed. They are all here. And who said they can't buy? There are so many ways of, you know, buying cars. We've been there before. We know how these things are done. So we are not actually, the Minister of Finance or the government does not grasp the enormity of the problem that is being faced by this country at the moment. How do we reduce our debt? You are solving your problem we are having, which part of it is debt, your deficit to debt, because your
but this is some revenue that will deal with that. Then you also have us contributing through payment of our property rates, payment of, you know, our taxes at the ports and the like. And then, of course, the fuel taxes.
These are structured. You know, the property thing we're talking about is not something that will happen tomorrow. It will take time.
Yes.
So these are structural problems. But how do you deal immediately now, today, with your fuel prices at the level that they are at?
For you, that's the most immediate. That's the most immediate thing.
How do you deal with the exchange rate? Because in economics, you have a short term, medium term, and long term. You cannot be doing long term and ignore short and medium term, because you will not even get to the long term because you collapse. How do we resolve the currency that is running away from us, that we don't have enough reserves to be able to cushion it? How many dollars can we put to take out cedis from the system to strengthen our currency? Inflation. How do we deal with the food inflation that we are facing at the moment, when we have dealt with a structural problem of planting for food and jobs, which is a structural thing, and we must continue. But we must also review that why is it that we are planting, the more we plant, this government, the more this government plant, the less we harvest. That is problematic.
Okay.
Let
me stop.
The budget, their own budget, will tell you that the contribution of GDP, let's forget even agriculture, crops, which is what they are planting, is declining since 2017.
All right. Dr. Kabir.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And I wish I had got enough time to address.
Oh, you can address. It's just that you need to be very specific.
Yeah,
let's not go into a long narrative.
Yeah, I just want to
so just tell me, for instance, the road toll issue has come up. Is that something that can be looked at again? There's a general consensus that it has to come back.
Yeah, it's something that can be looked at, and I think government is open to discussion. That is a simple answer that I think it doesn't need any, if you like, any argument about. Government is open to having discussion on whichever way we can be able to collect enough revenue and to cut down expenditure to manage the economy. But that said, I'm happy that you're able to call some of the things that we do say to order. They were strangled made, and I think that when we're having a discourse of this nature, you must be at least be factual to the issue. Kanda Highway never was even constructed in the first place. And to even stay on radio, national television, to make the point that there are potholes already being devolved on it after it has been done, cannot be true. It's a palpable lie. So these are some of the, I mean, I can go on to say that government is concentrating on 7.5 reduction. It's not to be fair to it. That means lacking the appreciation of what deficit meant for the suffering of Ghanaians. If you don't appreciate what it means to have a running economy with deficit and the suffering it means for Ghanaians, you will say such a thing. Two, if you don't understand the exchange rate, the pressure we're having is the exchange rate. One of the reasons we're having this way is the exchange rate pressure. If you don't understand how it is that when your cedi is depreciated, it is Ghanaians who are suffering. You make such a comment that government is concerned about itself, is concerned about 7.5. If you don't appreciate the fact that, I mean, if economy is not growing, it's the Ghanaian people who suffer. In the midst of, opulence lifestyle, it's the Ghanaian people who suffer. You make such a comment. So I just want us to know that, we may have issues with the government. We may have some reservations, genuine ones. Government should be receptive to those particular reservations. But when we throw away the facts and just go on into sentimental discourse, it makes it difficult for people to appreciate the issue. Let me talk about the issue of the downgrading. You mentioned about it. True. Downgrading, when, Moody, S&P camp, they hold conferences with the Minister of Finance. He's been there.
I understand we subscribe to them.
Yes, they don't just come and take things and run to town and downgrade you. They hold conferences. They look at your plan, your budget. They look at your revenue measures. They look at your expenditure measures. And they would make decisions based on that. So one of the things that let the horse out was because of our revenue, the unpredictability of our revenue measures. It was anchored around 6.9%, 6.9 billion of coming from e-levy. That wasn't realized. That took a government a long time to even have certainty on it. So when you have such a situation, they have no way but to say that, you know what, it is risky borrowing to this particular country because their ability to get revenue in order to pay is questionable. That's the basis of this particular downgrading we are having. People mention about the vice president stay on the fixed income. The vice president is actually, at his lecture, he mentioned that there's no distinction. You cannot characterize or you cannot distinguish between managing an economy and running a digital economy. The two run hand in hand. Because corruption, you can fight it with productivity, you can increase it with digitization. Every facet of the economic, of phases is, countries that have evolved have actually used this particular digitization. So this, you mentioned about fuel coupons. Well, it's a very good call. I think that, again, I am a government appointee. I work for the government. There are times that government takes even measure to say that, you know what, things are hard. Even now, I remember the Jubilee House, when the president announced it, when the president announced the finance minister, they started calling officers to take their details of their car and the amount of fuel they were supposed to be taken. That is a measure that is being implemented, immediately. So these are some of the issues that I just say, my brother should rather mention about the fact that when we are running an economy and he mentioned about the issue of taxation, you cannot do away with
I don't think anyone is asking to do away with taxation, Dr. Mahama. Exactly. But I think the concern Mr. Redu raised is that you cannot hinge development just on taxes or the tax revenue you'll be collecting, particularly indirect tax, which a lot of people who are poor or are not making as much in a year.
Yeah, I think this government has shown fidelity to that particular concept of development, move away from taxation. When we came to office, 15 taxes were scrapped. Some of them on petroleum, excise on petroleum special levy were taken off.
Yes, but some were also extended. We know that there was supposed to be a sunset clause for, I think, is it the energy sector levy? And that had been, and that is going, it's been extended to what, 2035?
Yeah, I'm saying that. I am saying that.
So you take, so it's like you take with the left hand what you've given with the right hand.
I've always said that tax measures are supposed to serve a purpose. There are tax measures that are supposed to live with you eternally. Because those measures are to have the perception or the mindset that tax measures are supposed to have sunset clauses is problematic. Some of them are actually addressing transitional problems. The transitional nature of it determines whether we should have a sunset clause on it or we should leave it and it goes on. So if there was a tax measure that was supposed to be having a sunset clause, my understanding is that it's well and good that government scrapped that particular tax. However, if the problem persists, for instance, legacy debt in the energy sector is still there, Do you tell the government that you should scrap it off because it has a sunset clause when you've not finished paying the debt? No, it doesn't make sense. So these are some of the reasons why you see some of the tax measures still being continued, or the government still pursue them rather than scrapping them. We have an issue at hand. And the issue we have is, Mr. Hagan mentioned it, that we need to look at the immediate solution to the management of the economy. The measures we've taken, there's no doubt that those measures are yielding results.
Really?
There's no doubt that those measures are yielding results. You cannot have a 2 billion dollar into the economy. You cannot have within the next 2 to 6 weeks another 2 billion Ghana cedi, and the cedi will never see a depreciation. People who were actually cashing in with this dollar are now probably releasing their dollars.
Okay. So there's a question, though, I raised about the measures and the duration. It's supposed to last for the rest of the year. The finance minister did indicate that there will be a review mid-year. I also can't presume then that the mid-year budget review will see some reviews or revisions. That's the 2022 budget. I'm just wondering, why can't we stretch this for longer?
I mean, government would come back at the mid-year review to tell us that this revenue we're even expecting hasn't come. So if there's a need for us to cut down much of our expenditure, would someone mention that, why don't we you mentioned that we should rather cut it, and one of your listeners said that they have cut, yes, there's deficit. And you asked me to note it, to address it. Reason why you always have a deficit, or we always have deficit, that one, you would expect that your revenue matches with your expectation. But most often, our projections are far more than what we yield. So that would always create a hole. That will create a hole in the pocket to ensure, that will make it difficult for us to meet the deficit target. Two, for instance, in 2020, 2011, we spent in excess of 28 billion. Reason being that, one, we lost revenue over 13 billion. And then COVID brought additional expenditure. Together, close to 30 billion was what we had to spend in excess of what we were expecting. So if a government is faced with such a situation, you did not meet your revenue, you cannot also leave people to die, because you need to spend on the people. And we all knew that expenditure, though created problem, but has solved a lot of problems. Our death rate is a little above 1,000 people, 1,400 people.
From COVID?
From COVID.
Yes.
Which
is about 1,400, 1,300.
Less than 0.5% of people affected. The African rate is 4%. The world is about 7%. So if we were able to save the lives of Ghanaians, that many people did not die due to COVID, and the government had to spend more than it had to save that. When problems come as a result, we should be magnanimous enough to empathize with a government that has taken this bold decision in order to save the life of, its citizenry. That is one. Two, if government had thought that we want to increase productivity, as is mentioned, we shouldn't be taxing, and government reduced benchmark values because we're seeing that they were nuisance. They were not making artisans and traders be able to be in business. And that particular tax measure reduced our revenue, or probably it put a burden on even domestic production of those particular goods. People should also understand that it is a government intention to have helped the people. As it did not work well, it is only fair and good that you call on the government to review that measure. Okay. But you shouldn't blame that government that a measure that it took in the interest of the people and believing seemed to be true, it has backfired, and that the government has to fall or has to pay the penalty for that. I've always said that until we are able to, as a country, understand that no government is ever interested in inflicting pains on its citizens, not even in authoritarian regimes. Until we appreciate that, we'll always have problems with government.
Okay.
So decisions on policies are not taken lightly. There are several discussions about this particular policy, people sit down and think, people do research. But when they come out, the impression is that you just sit down and throw people on this. The last issue I want to address before probably
Mr. Redu will join us
is
shortly.
the issue about the tolling of this particular. I believe that the issue about the road toll was supposed, first and foremost, we must know that government did not just take it because we're not interested in the money. The transport operators called on government to say that, you know what, we'll continue passing on this cost to commercial, bus users or truck users if you continue tolling us. Two, it is creating a lot of nuisance on our roads. Before, what broke the camel's back was when the truck ran into some of them at the Temamoto way. People losing their lives at this particular toll.
Okay, but that's not that. I blame the truck driver and his owner who don't maintain their vehicles regularly. So I don't know if that's a good excuse. There's still traffic on the Kaswa.
It is what government.
There's still traffic on the Kaswa road, even without the toll.
But you and I know that. You and I know that traffic is not as it was. If we have to face the truck, I've used the Kaswa. I've used the Temamoto way.
Yes, so I think that, if anything, it is the system we run where we manually pay. At the University of Ghana, if you want to pass through and you have e-card, you just pass through. Nothing, there is no traffic. There is no handing money to anyone to waste any time to collect change. So the point I'm just trying to make is that it's fine that government is considerate and says, okay, it doesn't want to toll Ghanaians because probably it was hoping to get extra funds. But the truth is, there are more efficient systems that we can use to collect these monies to eliminate some of the nuisances.
Government will come with revised measures of collecting to not even revenue collection. We are moving towards it. But I'll tell you that when we get there, we'll come back to this particular studio to discuss it.
No problem. I'll be happy to have you. Yes, Mr. Redu, you can join us now. Let's talk on this part. I want you to talk a bit about the measures from revenue mobilization. I know you've made your point about taxes and the indirect taxes, but certainly we must collect property rates. And now there's a digital system for that to enable us collect property rates. We must ensure that people pay their fees at the ports of entry, whether it's at the land borders or at the Tema or Takoradi port. And government also plans to wean off public institutions by giving them a lump sum amount, and then they deal with their issues. What are your thoughts on those revenue mobilization strategies? Please unmute. I think you are still muted, if that's okay.
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead. We can hear you now.
Yes, before I respond to that, let me just speak one or two issues to what Dr. Kabiru said in relation to the point I made about the roads.
Yeah.
He definitely took me out of context. I never said Kanda Highway was constructed. I'm talking about the portals that have started developing on the Kanda Highway. Now, if you want specifics, I'll give you the specifics. When you go to Asali highways down to Lakeside Estates, the road was completely asphalted. Today, not a single asphalt is on the road.
When was it asphalted?
If you go to before the Ayawaso bike next overnight, right? Jowolu, Abilinki, parts of East Lagos and West Airport, roads were done. Dr. Kabiru, at your leisure time, take a ride on these roads and you see the portals that have started developing.
When were they constructed? That's the question.
They were constructed before the by-election when Ejako lost his life. Where the one that brought Seram, that famous Ayawasu, whatever problems that have been there. These were done. And I'm saying that if you want specifics, I am giving you the specifics. Come there and you see the potholes and cracks that are developing. I only use the Kanda Highway as because it's a major road for people who drive to see. I didn't say Kanda Highway was constructed at this government. Anyway, to the points that you're making. You see, first of all, property rate tax is something that you cannot debate. It must be done. But then again, property rates are not for the government. They are supposed to be for the specific assemblies, because the assemblies also have a duty to ensure that they maintain certain basic things within the area that they are responsible for. You see, then that question of this whole decentralization and centralization issue comes up again. Because if certain things are not happening within the area, you expect the assembly to take care of that. So if the government is the one going to take that money and will not give it to the assembly, and then there are problems within the assembly, where have we gone? But I think there's one important thing that I also realized from the statement, that we are talking about what? Is it a duty, pay or don't get it out? So what happens to the whole concept of the bonded warehouse system that we have in the country, where, you know, for some reason goods are put in there, and then as and when they are taken away, the duties are paid? What is going to happen to that? Are we sure that is the right thing to do? Are we sure we are not going to hurt business? I think we need to take a second look at this. If you are talking about that mobilization issue, well, I come to tell you that we need to look at the generation of revenue. And I believe the generation of the revenue is why we have the SOEs available. These SOEs are supposed to work, make profits, and at the end of the day, pay dividends. So that area, you want to ask yourself, was it last year or last 2 years, the government talked about the fact that there were total losses of over 580 million Ghana cedis. Surprisingly, the people who are sitting there, who made those losses, are still sitting in office. What have we done to them? It tells you they don't have what it takes to do the job. Why maintain them? Why don't you think of getting people who have what it takes to do the job and then you go back? Today, we are looking at issues relating to debt. Common sense. How do you borrow money? And when it's time for you to pay, you go and borrow money again and pay. Does it make sense? You borrow money for a project. It's time for you to pay the money. Then you go and borrow money. So you are always in debt. If you were concentrating on generating the good money, those monies would have come in to pay those debts, and you will not be running at all these serious high interest and then principal payment. As we're talking today, how do you call it? We are being made to understand that there's some 1.6 billion that has to be paid within a very short time. So for that matter, we're going to get this 2 billion to come in to take care of that. When it takes care of it, what is going to happen? You have 400. What is the 400 going to do? You are sitting in a country where, as my brother will say, Randy Abbey will say, mosquitoes are chewing us. Yes, so we cannot even produce the mosquito insecticides or coils or whatever to take care of us. The one who is not suffering from mosquitoes, he is making it available for you to use. When the opportunities are there for us to make money, as I said, because of the greed, materialistic wealth acquisition, political, because people want to stay in power and continue to chop money, they would not give the Ghanaian the opportunity to do what he has to do to help expand the economy, to help create the employment, to help maintain the money in this country. Everything of ours is going out. My friend the other time was talking. Yes, and of course it makes a lot of sense. When we talk of investors, as if the Ghanaian is not an investor. We don't want the Ghanaian to grow. Unnecessary envy, bitterness. So when a Ghanaian is doing well, we want to break him down, but we prefer the foreigner to come in. A classic example is the noise that has been made about frontiers. I recall when this frontiers issue was coming up, Noguchi mounted the defense. Why don't you give that business to us? Today, these guys are raking over $70 million. And where is the money? And then they'll give Ghana airport company just about 1 billion, and then they cannot pay their electricity bills. And then the whole airport must be shut down. You want to, if these monies have come into Noguchi, would Noguchi not have expanded and probably got to the best of the ratings of international world laboratories and what have you, more employment would have come in. Wouldn't we do that? You have a system today. That old man was in A-Life. A-Life started his shop. If the guy faulted somewhere relating to taxes, know how to deal with it and let the taxes be paid. But we do everything and run them down. Today, you have Palace Mall, you have China Mall, you have Kuala, you have ShopRite, you have named them. All these guys, apart from the imports they make, they still carry their profits out of this country. Why wouldn't your city lose its strength? But if you had encouraged the Ghanaian to be in here, that Ghanaian will keep his money here and you will not be struggling for these things. 2 questions were asked the minister, all relating to toll. He never answered the question. All he said was that the new management is in talks with the Minister for Energy to see about the setting up of a new plant. Are you suggesting that TOR is not working, TOR is dead, or TOR is collapsed?
Currently, TOR is not fully operational. It's not really working. And I know questions have come up about refining the crude that we produce in country. The issue with that also is that there are companies that produce that fuel. It means the country has to go into a formal agreement with them. You have to buy that crude and refine it in country, and then you distribute in country. So there are structural and contractual issues as a country we must deal with if we want to refine in country. And then also we must calibrate the refinery to refine that particular crude, because what I know is that that's not currently possible.
Well, let me tell you what is happening to TOR.
Okay, we can't go too much into the detail of that.
No, it's important. No, because it's important. You see, it is part of, isn't it oil, petrol that is creating all this hassle for us? It's very important. You see, the cartels, they prefer...
Who are you talking about the importers of refined fuel? Are they the
all
cartels?
of them, all these bad people. Look, they prefer to go and bring imported products for TOR to refine for them. TOR is working. They bring it and then they want the people to refine. And then when they refine, they get whatever monies that they get, the excess, which the catalytic cracker should have broken down to get more fuel revenue from, they ship it away. And then these are the guys supporting and funding the political parties. So they will never allow it to work. That's what I'm saying. This is the greed. But you know what funny thing? If TOR were to be working, look, the kind of things that TOR would have done for this country, because the byproduct, crude is a zero waste product. Even the chair you are sitting on is all part of. Why should we import bitumen into this country at higher figures, whereas if TOR were working, you will get the bitumen from there to do our goods? Today, our farmers are crying because they cannot get fertilizer, and therefore some farmers have decided that they are going to abandon their farms. Fertilizer is what? A byproduct of crude. The plastics we are ordering into this country, go to the Ministry of Finance and the Bank of Ghana website. We ordered plastics over $560 million into this country in the year 2020. All these are byproducts of the crude. But because of the way our people just want the greed, as I said, they don't want the country to move on. Today, as Nana says, one district, one factory, one year, one factory. Fine. Now that one district, one factory, the bitumen that would have come from that area, we would have used it to expand the country, the road networks. It would have been easier for factories to go and then, settle in those areas. All these byproducts and things that would have gotten factories to be there and would have maintained dollars. The same corruption is what has been happening in Nigeria. That is why they have that problem. Today, Dangote is building a factory there, a refinery there, over 500,000 barrels. And you can imagine tomorrow you'll be the biggest exporter of fertilizer in the whole of West Africa. Individual, research in this country, everybody was there. Kotoka International Airport has been there all this while. A single man, Dan Macaulay, saw the need that we can do something here. When he starts, they want to put spokes in his foot to frustrate him.
I think that has finally been dealt with.
I'm just giving some of these things that you see. When you fail to see the Ghanaian as an investor, and you think that investors should always come from outside. This FDIs. The FDI brings in 3 million, he sends away $100 million. So you, the little dollars that you are also putting in place, they will carry all away, and your city will continue to lose the strength.
All right. So I think you've made that point in terms of how we manage the forex. We need to take a break, but let me read these messages and then I'll come to Professor Mauto, because with you, I would like you to take us through about what the implication of the policy to wean off public institutions from government's financing will mean for many of us who look to, you know, education at the higher level for a subsidized fee. This one from Kweku from La Paz. He says, let's be honest with ourselves. Our economic meltdown was due to incompetence, profligacy, and failing to plan. China and Vietnam are doing well despite the pandemic. I don't know what their numbers look like, but Dr. Kabir, you can look at what China and Vietnam have been doing. This one from Hamemegame from Denu. Sometimes our demeanor alone indicates whether what we are espousing holds water. They themselves know that the measures instituted may not work. I agree with Professor Mauto. He says these measures should have been implemented some 2 years ago. Original Muta from Belgrade City writes, the Ghanaian public must understand that we are in a global crisis and we must all contribute our quota to build up the economy. Mohammed Hussein from Janga, the MPP has done a tremendous job when it comes to managing the Ghanaian economy. Upon all the external shocks, the economic management team has performed better. Stephen from Kwabenya writes, why is the finance minister saying that it's the minority that's holding the e-levy from being passed instead of marshalling their 138 MPs to pass the e-levy? Those were some of your messages. Thank you very much. We take a quick break and we'll be right back. Thank you for staying with us here on the Key Points, and thank you for your messages. I've seen your messages on Twitter. I'll come to them. I've been reading those that have been coming on WhatsApp. So please, I haven't forgotten you if you're on Twitter and Facebook. But let me come to Professor Mauto, because one of the measures put in the finance minister's update was that they were going to wean public universities off government subvention. Tell me, what are the implications of this? Or better still, is this something you are dean at the UPSA? Is that something you will all be happy with?
All right. Let me correct this notion, especially when it comes to funding, direct funding from government to most universities in contemporary university management. I think the minister was clear as to what they really wanted to do with respect to compensation, to wean off the tertiary institutions from government payroll. Okay.
And provide you with a fixed block grants instead.
Okay. And this has several implications. If it is to go by what exists, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed at all, because we are just giving us a grant which probably will be equivalent to the salaries that we receive every year. This is, I think, this is just the intention, but we need to interrogate the content of what must be done and also come out with some practical implementation of that.
Okay, but just clarify for me.
Yeah, okay, all right.
If public tertiary institutions are weaned off public payroll, it means public universities will have to pay
salaries.
Staff.
Yeah.
Salaries.
Yeah.
So and then you talk about a block grant.
Thank you.
What's the difference? Because if you are paying salaries yourself,
okay,
then government provides a block grant.
Thank you.
Is that what is preferred?
So that's why I said we need to interrogate all this. The content of the grant, will it be equivalent to the salaries that you are giving each year? If yes, then nothing has changed. So the issue of salary increment, whenever it increases, that grant will also increase. When this is the arrangement, then nothing has happened. But you see, by so doing, what are you solving? Okay, the strike, the perennial strike will persist whenever it comes to negotiations and all that. We've gotten to a stage that, Jiva, I think we should solve problems with some timelines.
Okay, I want to ask, can public universities pay themselves, their staff, if government were to stop them from being on public payroll today?
All right. What it means is that if you want public universities to pay salaries, then the students must pay the associated costs of training each student.
Then it means you are turning the public university into a private university.
That's what it means. That is, if there's nothing coming in. Okay, so let's look at it today. Today, we have some public universities which do not enjoy what some of us enjoy. One of them is GIMPA. So you ask us, how many Ghanaians can afford education from GIMPA? Because GIMPA, even though a public university, they pay their own salaries. It means they have to raise revenue to offset their cost. And if you want to run the entire university system like GIMPA, then it means that education at the highest level will be very, very expensive. Now, what also persists now, I can tell you it's not sustainable. So there's a need to have a very sincere conversation as to how public universities must be managed. You cannot use the same system to manage all the public universities. Some of them, to be frank with you, we need to have, sincere conversation, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay. Does that have any relationship with the public universities bill that has not been passed?
It has. Because once it happens, it means some of the provisions have to change again. Okay, but once again, there are always caveats. There are always caveats when it comes to finances. That this is a grant that is going in to serve a purpose. But I have my own opinion, which if you want me to submit, I will submit. That we've gotten to a stage that indeed the government cannot probably take everything. Okay, those grants are not bad. There's the need, because there are several options for the universities to generate extra revenue. Okay, and it's getting to a time that they must also probably contribute towards the management of it. Even though today, it will interest you to know that government is not invested so much into capex when it comes to the
that is the building of the structures,
the capital projects,
providing logistics. It only pays salaries.
Even Get Fund is questionable, because
some of the projects are on ice for a long time.
There's a refocusing of Get Fund funding of tertiary institutions. Much of their funds goes into the basic and secondary educational sectors, but at the tertiary level, when it comes to buildings, infrastructure, the universities are already funding them. So when you wean the universities off the payroll, what it means is that cost of education, tertiary education in Ghana is going to increase. And once this happens, how many of us can afford it? Okay. Now, let's as I said, if I don't want to take, because I want to submit on some of the other issues.
Yes, that's okay.
Okay, so I think for now,
you have some time. So when you make your points, just a quick one. When you make your points, I will let Dr. Kabir respond.
All right.
Then that will be the final bit. Then I'll take final points.
All right.
Then we wrap up.
Okay, so we don't know the content of this proposition. So what we have to do is to subject it. The minister must meet the universities and see how best they can be implemented. I think the previous issues has to do with positions of e-levy as well as the road tolls. I was just waiting to submit my opinion on it. And I think I resonate with, my beliefs resonate with everybody's submission here, that it was just unfortunate that when you have, it's always difficult to introduce additional revenue to your revenue, streams. And you already have one, which you even have the opportunity to even enhance, but you scrapped it in anticipation of something you haven't received yet. I know it was because of the e-levy. Okay, but you see, that's one of the revenues that Ghanaians have government scrapped, that Ghanaians even criticized. That look, most Ghanaians have criticized that look, you have a revenue stream, you are facing financial deficiency. Why not maintain it and even enhance upon it? If they are listening to us, they should do the same. It doesn't mean that you will not get probably your e-levy passed. It's unfortunate, to be frank, it's honorable. I think the position of the minority, you people should look at it from a very patriotic point of view, a national point of view, that look, we've gotten to a stage that...
I hope I'll get an opportunity.
Yes, because I'm yet to listen to any of the minority members with respect to the e-levy. We have resolved that we will not accept. It gets to a stage that you need to take a second look at it. Just do an introspection of whatever has transpired all over the years, all over the period. Since the intended proposition to introduce the e-levy. For me, it was a decision between the continuous levying of very sensitive products. 2 years ago, myself and my colleague, Professor Lord Mensah, the pre-budget discussions were here and asked the government, we wonder, look, given the situation now, do not tax petroleum products. When you tax it, you see, it affects every facet of life. Virtually, it's going to impact on food, everything, housing, everything, petroleum product, because the reliance of petroleum product is so magnificent that it spreads out to various facets of the economy. So why not look out for other innovative means of generating funds? And one of them is this e-levy. You see, e-levy may not impact the entire economy. It's a matter of choice. Indeed, some will say that, okay, you are gearing towards the automating the entire economy. But I see, e-levy is choice. If I want some sort of agency, I'll probably opt for e-levy. So if Ghanaians are moving towards that, and it's another area that may not impact, but as for fuel, once you tax fuel, you are taxing everybody in this country. So that's why, for me, I don't believe in the saying that Ghanaians don't pay tax. We pay tax a lot. We pay tax a lot. Sometimes I don't want to look through my pay slip. I don't know whether you also do so, because I pay so much. I don't know about Jifa.
I do.
I don't know about you.
I do.
I don't know about Honorable, but we really pay tax. So the e-levy argument, I think, a minority, take a second look at it. But let me give the government a candid opinion. Over the years, when it comes to the introduction of new taxes, okay, Ghanaians love paying tax. It's not like we don't love paying tax. But when you educate us as to what that tax will be used for, we tend to appreciate it. And I'm very happy that Honorable mentioned that the way it was introduced, it is true. My colleagues' government did not introduce it the way it must be introduced. Look at, you introduced a tax, went back to start education. Education should have preceded the introduction of the tax. It means something went wrong. And it is good you have accepted now educating people. But you see, you know why VAT became successful? Which was introduced by Honorable's party. It became successful because VAT, which was an alien tax to Ghanaians, which was going to add some additional tax burden, was linked to a project, and that project was education. And after it was reviewed, Ghanaians accepted it.
That's the Get Fund levy.
The Get Fund.
Yes.
That's the Get Fund.
Yes.
Get Fund. So,
and I think it's same with NHIS.
Thank
as,
you.
The NHIL is as it's called. The National Health Insurance Levy.
Now, whenever VAT was increased, there was a project attached to it. Ghanaians don't complain. There's a new. This is just a free consultancy. Okay, I know you are part of the economic management team. I mean, even if you are serving as a subsidiary of the team. You see, we've gotten to a stage that I'm one of the few, probably because I'm biased, with the free SHS. Jifa, our pre-conversation, I mean, allude to the fact that for education to be subsidized, some of us may not have that opportunity to have been educated. Okay, so I'm for free SHS. Whatever we have to do to sustain this policy, such that it gives opportunities for everyone to have a pre-tertiary education, we must do it as a country.
I think my boss puts it very well, Michael TAJ, in a Facebook post where he says, we're in a country where every available scholarship is gobbled up by the rich. Why should we not be sensitive to putting or ensuring the sustainability of a policy that at least is biased to those who are the underprivileged or the underserved? But there are questions about how much we've been spending on it and whether that is sustainable. Shouldn't we then look at certain things? Because boarding facilities, for instance, I'm an old Achimotan. Yesterday I was there, one of the year groups, the 97 year group, SSS, they were celebrating 25 years since they left school. The 1972 celebrating 50 years since they left school. And I looked around at the infrastructure. How do you maintain such infrastructure boarding with students of what, 4,500? If there isn't some component to deal with the boarding section, which requires money?
Chifa, it's not just about the boarding section. It's a problem that spreads all over the country, not only at Chimota, with respect to only boarding.
Yeah.
It is either free education or no free education for that level. Because if you wanted to go into it, the argument will also be espoused by those who also pay more tax. That indeed, if you are trying to alleviate some burden on the poor, then help me as well. So I also disagree with the proponent who have the view that I can pay, so allow me to pay. I disagree with them. It's a public product. If it is free, let it make it free. In terms of consuming road as service or a product, I would say that because I can pay, I'll pass on third road, and if you can't pay, go and pass on third road. It's a public product, so open the opportunity for everybody to consume it. What I mean here is, I don't think it's late. That if we want to free the revenue we use to manage the free SHS, and now tag the free SHS to the e-levy. What it means is that I'm paying e-levy to support free SHS. Currently, we don't have any sustainable revenue towards that. And I know it's a policy that this government will never, they don't even want to review it. If you look at their posture, are you okay? Like my Honorable's party want to do, they would like to review it. And I know that if this government is able to get a sustainable funding of free SHS, there's no way that Ghanaians will even allow any party in the future to get it reviewed. This is just by the way. I mean, it's free consultancy to our government that if you really want to probably convince people as to why Ghanaians would like to pay, interview. You have been doing a lot of service. Ghanaians will be willing to help. But I see, over the years, Ghanaians have lost confidence in politicians. That data is available. It's not coming from me. There are CDD, data survey on that. A lot of them, I know your sister stations have been conducting, yourself you have been conducting it. The confidence is the issue, but not the willingness to pay. So they should be looking at how to get some of those things done and ensure that, Ghanaians will know that indeed the good policy you introduce will be sustained, not now, but into the unforeseeable future. Then, Jiva, the issue of the economy, okay? The economy. There were some of the issues that I flagged that I really wanted to, but I don't because it's been already discussed.
No, but you can raise whatever point you want to raise quickly, and then I'll let Honorable respond to the e-levy appeal. Okay. Oh no, I know it's sunk down. So I know it's sunk down, and I know that my good friend knew and will admit that they didn't start well with the e-levy, and it is good they have made a swift turn to educate Ghanaians on that. BOG, the agency in charge of the monetary affairs of this country, to be frank with you. Indeed, I think this issue of perennial short-term measures just to curtail will set for the system to deteriorate and then come in with a policy that always there's evidence that whenever you increase the policy rate, in the long run, it hurts the financial institutions of this country. Look, doesn't really hurt the financial institutions.
It hurts so hard.
They seem to declare good profits year on year, even in a year of COVID.
Do you interrogate their profits?
No.
Thank you. That's another conversation to have. You see, profit and cash are not the same. I'm an accountant. I'm a finance person. You know you can have money without making profit.
Have money without making profit?
Yes. You can make profit, you don't have money, you don't have anything.
Because it's tied to your debts and liabilities.
A lot. So you see, there's so much we need to look at when it comes to the implication of increasing the policy rate. A lot of economists have called for it. And in the short term, there's nothing to do than to do that because of the structures. We don't have a sustainable structures to sustain. Edgar has mentioned some of the variables that we need to put in place to strengthen our currency. We don't do it. So at the end of the day, BOG has no other option than to use such, I say, traditional and archaic ways of addressing these perennial problems. Now, at the end of the day, it's going to make credit expensive. Are you okay? Then we are going back to the era of banks running into another financial turbulence. Okay? Now, currently, if somebody tells you that the cost of credit is cheap, it's not true. It is still high. It is still high. People are taking loans at 30%. And the painful thing is that those who need loans most are those who pay more. The micro level, the market women, in fact, they pay monthly interest, probably because of the risk associated with them, because they are highly risky. Okay, so once you introduce this, it will worsen the situation of those market women. It will worsen the situation of expansion. People in the private sector will be crowded out of it.
So what's the alternative?
So that I say, see, it's a necessary evil now. It's a short-term measure, but the implication is too destructive to the economy.
Okay.
Okay. It ends up hurting businessmen. Do you know what it means to take loans at 25%? How much are you making out of your revenue and your cost of production? So reduce 25% of it. You'll be recording losses. So banks are recording profit and their clients are recording losses. What happens? Non-performing loans. There's going to be high rate of defaults. People cannot pay. And when there's high rate of default over time, what happens to the banks? They'll start writing off loans that they have declared profit. Are you okay? They have declared profit over the years. Start writing them off. Then their assets will be depleted. Then we get back to the era where a government or will be asked by our foreign advisors that, look, you need to clean up your banking sector. I just hope we will not go to this vicious cycle as a country again.
Okay.
And then address the issues as they are. Look, I always love Edgar for his frankness. He says it as it is, and he doesn't do academic, discussion at all. He speaks to what the people must understand. In fact, Edgar is good for the classroom, and he tells me that he will never come to the classroom because
you can invite him for a seminar session. So Honorable Ricky Tegan, your quick response on the appeal for a reconsideration of the e-levy. Interesting point Professor Malto raises, tie e-levy to say free SHS. Let's fix that problem once and for all. Maybe Ghanaians may see the light in that.
Yeah, thank you, Jifa, and thanks, Prof. I will convey your message.
They've heard it, I'm sure.
to the minority. But the idea that being against e-levy makes us unpatriotic, that I think is not acceptable.
Okay.
I mean, there's nobody in this country who actually wants the downfall of the country. As to whether what we do actually do anything for the country is another thing. They say every tax is difficult. I mean, when you introduce any new tax, people always don't want to pay tax. But that is not exactly true. People understand and appreciate that government needs taxes to be able to get a tax revenue to fix the roads we are talking about, to build the hospitals, the schools, and all the things that government needs to provide to us as a service for us to be able to function. What people don't accept is when they see their tax money not being used for the right things. When they see wasteful expenditure, when they see recklessness in the way we spend our money, that's what becomes a problem. So, minority says no to e-levy does not make us unpatriotic, because there are Ghanaians who are saying no to e-levy. Are they unpatriotic? So, the issue, look, it could have been any tax, not necessarily e-levy, in the times that we are in, and that tax would have had the same challenges as the e-levy is having. So the issue is not about people not wanting to pay tax. It's about their feeling that when we pay tax, we don't see what the tax money, and not to take this personal, I hate that type of politics. But when you look at your president hiring a jet for $15,000 or something an hour, these are the challenges that Ghanaians have. I mean, he recently went to Dubai on a commercial flight, which I think a lot of people are applauding.
Yeah.
I'm sure the same luxuries were given to him on that flight. So this is where the problem is. I mean, as I said, we know that the economy of this world are shifting, and they are all moving into the digital. So the traditional way of raising revenue from a traditional economy is fast disappearing, and it's going into the, but there are bigger fish in that area than the e-levy, which directly affects poor people. The thing with the universities, or even with the free SHS, is that I have always believed, and all of us believe in free education. I mean, free education is the reason why some of us are sitting here, and a lot of people who are occupying positions in this country, But when you want to do free education based on tax revenue, it can be very difficult. We are a country that, as I said, commodity-based economy. There are a lot of things. We were never producing oil. We become an oil-ranking nation. So maybe, again, the discussion should start with the idea that some of these natural resources that we get, nobody has seen the oil that we take from our offshore before. And people don't even know what they are benefiting from the oil. So you could say there are a few people on the platforms over there who are probably making the money with their headquarters. So if free education is linked to, say, our petroleum revenue, then every Ghanaian walking on the street could say that, look, what is the benefit of this oil to us? It's the oil that is giving my child a free education. When you are doing it through taxes or through borrowing, which is not sustainable, then you are creating a problem for yourself that is snowballing. Today is 2 billion. Tomorrow is going to increase because you have a population going up, you have infrastructure not keeping up with stuff and all that. This idea of public university, look.
And that will be your final point quickly,
yes,
please.
We have destroyed our education enough. Let's just leave these universities. Look, if we want to tackle weaning people off, we have 126 SOEs that are losing money every year and have chief executives who are taking money bigger than even the president. Yet year on year, they make no profit. Look, I'm not saying we should go to the 80s, when the Rollins 80s, when we divested these. We should win these people off to stand on their own and be profitable, and the CEO's salaries linked to their productivity, rather than paying their salaries and giving them all these things we are giving them, and also be able to allow them to, some of them can be profitable. They have IGFs, but the IGFs, I remember when I was finance, I was always negotiating IGF issues, trying to take more IGFs for people who are making them.
And we don't allow it,
Let them have their IGFs and let them do their own, business and make their own money. So instead of going to, once you touch the public universities in that way, obviously there should be some partnership where the public universities can attract some amount of money from other services that they provide to students and all that, to be able to generate, investors generate IGFs, to be able to support things. But the moment you go into paying their own lectures and all these things, then you are making it a private university.
All right.
You are opening it up for people to be able to go to school. You need to be able to pay. And education is very expensive if it's not properly controlled. If you go outside, some of the best universities in the world, look, you can't afford to go there.
All right,
you may have the brains and all that, and rather look at scholarships and make sure that they work. We are doing so many things in so many ways. These are all part of the structural problems.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Rikitega. Let me take Mr. Redu, and then Dr. Kabir, you have the final point to say everything. Yes, Mr. Redu, so your final points, sir.
Well,
yes, the rest of the time.
On a note relating to taxes, right? I recall Anofinto, who was then the Director General of GBC, Ghana Broadcasting. He tried to collect taxes for government. And the government came and said he was making them unpopular. And then for that matter, Ayebuafo and his team at the National Media Commission had to dismiss him. When he said that the TV license fee is a tax and it is in our books, we must go for it. They said he was making the government unpopular. Would this e-levy also make the government unpopular? That is just by the way. Now, let me just call all of us mind to something, right? According to the 2021 population census, this is what the boss says. And I read, according to current projections, Ghana's population will continue to grow. Ghana is currently growing at a rate of 2.15%. The population growth is alarming to experts, and the country is not equipped to handle the dramatically increased need for food, water, sanitation, education, and employment that comes with the rapidly growing population. This is the issue. The micro, what we are complaining about today is what we are being told that in the next couple of years it's going to get out of hand. It will be worse. So the strategies that the government is putting in place, and Dr. Kabiru disagrees with me, and it is emphatically stated here. If you go through the minister's own statement, page number 38, he is talking about the macro. It's the macro he's talking about, that at our cost they must achieve that the 7.4 the deficit. What the Ghanaian is talking about today is the high cost of rent, is the high cost of food. The high cost today, every 3 seconds your tap is not flowing. The expansion that is taking place in this country, our restricted nature of development before planning, these are issues that are confronting us. And if we fail to realize that there's a need to put certain brakes on the loans that we are borrowing, and therefore we have to generate by working. I'll tell you one simple thing. When we fail to realize the importance of the ground, I always say the importance of the soil. There's a lot of money we can make from the soil. If we find it necessary to make agriculture a very attractive venture, there's no point in having hundreds of thousands of national service personnel going to sit in the banks, and then the ministries, and all they do is sending them to go and buy cocoa, go and buy this, send this back here. The productivity to that area is zero. If we make the agriculture very, very attractive to the ordinary man, I'll tell you what, today they talk about Vietnam and China. Vietnam can make over $1 billion just from pepper. What you need to look at, what are your competitive advantages and what are your comparative advantages? Look at it as a country and know where you can generate revenue. Now, when you generate the revenue, you don't need to go and borrow. All these revenues will come back. I ask myself a simple question. If the ordinary man, the private man, can put his hands together and give us cocoa, whether it's 1 million tons or 750 million tons, there is still adequate land. What stops the government from also investing to make sure that we can get 2 to 3 million tons? The money that Bank of Ghana is making out of these percentage increases, for instance, in 2018 or 2019, Bank of Ghana made a profit of 1.5 billion just by increasing this year, whatever monetary the policy rates. What did they use the 1.5 billion for? Can they plow it back into the system in another way to help us grow? But they are chopping the money because it's excess money for them. The other aspect you also have to look at.
Okay, Edgar, you need to wrap up for me because we have just 6 minutes and I need to give Dr. Kabiru the rest of the time. You will be able to manage the time.
Yeah. Government has to look at its financing system all over again. Because there are some areas, because of, like for instance, the duties that we collect at the port, certain percentages go to certain establishments. Some of them get more money than they need, and all they do is dissipate it, chop it for themselves. Government needs to relook at this whole financing game and see that irrespective of the fact that we say this establishment must get 1% of everything, that 1% that is getting is too much. Get back to it and see how you can claw something back.
All right. Thank you very much, Edgar. So, Dr. Kabiru, you have the final word.
All right. Thank you very much. And I just want to start from Wuriju's point. The first point to note is that if you read the minister's statement, read paragraph 217 and 36 together, you would appreciate that the minister's statement is not what Mr. Wuriju is saying. So that is what I just want to note on that, because for the want of time.
Oh, no, you can quickly explain that.
So paragraph 2, the minister's statement mentioned the problems we are facing. He started with the fuel prices. He started with the rising inflation, cost of living, exchange rate depreciation, rising interest rate, and then we have revenue mobilization challenges. Then he goes on to 17 and noted about the international fuel price increment, which we all admit. Then when you come to the 36, the minister, before we went 36, the minister mentioned about 1D1F. We are talking about productivity. The minister talked about Ghana Cares program. He talks about the U-Start program. All these particular programs are supposed to help the Ghanaian people and supposed to help them in productivity and addressing the structural challenges we've all lamented about on this particular platform. So that we have to be aware of. It's not just about the cutting down of expenditure or tying ourselves to 7.5 deficit. That said, I want to also say that free senior education, free senior high school education is actually linked to our resources. The argument that it's never been linked has to be discarded, because our oil revenue, part of it is used to finance our free senior high school education. And people are asking the BOG to be cautious with the policy rate. Of course, I agree with Prof when he mentioned that policy rate hikes also come with associated problems. But that's the mechanism of the economy. Anything you do, there is another side of it. There's nothing, absolutely nothing you can do without other side. You just need to look at the balance. The fiscal policy by government, the monetary policy by the government. How do we ensure an equilibrium, a balance between the two to spur economic growth? So that is what we are focused on as a government. But at the end of the day, I feel like we have a consensus. People are saying that property rates are good. Government can go after them. Yes,
government can go after them, but Edgar raises the question about who is collecting the money. Is it going into consolidated fund or the assemblies?
There is always a revenue sharing formula. There is an item in the district assembly budget called seeded revenue. That central government takes and seeds the amount that, because with the central government collection, it's become much more centralized, and appropriate formula will be used to seed their revenue to them. So that practice has been ongoing, even with mineral inquiry, other things that have been, even road tool and all those things. That formula for sharing the revenue has always been in existence, and we can implement same. Public universities and the grant system. I'm happy Prof is coming from the academia, and he's here. The problem we have over the January and February was very unfortunate, where university lecturers have to sit down for a whole month or more without 40 days without actually going to the classroom. We don't want to have such a situation in this particular, but it will always come up. We need salary increment every year. That will be a legitimate demand of university teachers. So how do we ensure that we have predictability in our budgeting system? How do we ensure that government can be able to plan in the next medium to long term? If we have a grant system, we know that universities are expected to this particular grant. They will regulate the demand for increment of salary according to what is in their purse. That is simple. That is simple thing they will be able to do. People have also mentioned about Vietnam and using it as a case. Vietnam projection of growth is 5.5 for 2020. We are doing even far better than that. Our projection is same. So that's what I'm saying. When you have a country that is growing even better than that particular country, and you are using that as a benchmark, is it that you don't appreciate what we are doing as a country. We always want to think that others are doing better than. Vietnam is not doing better than Ghana in terms of growth, in terms of macroeconomic indicators. That is a point we need to drum home. And lastly, because
it's okay. Make your
start.
point
All right,
quickly.
so there is also about the need to encourage local industries. I have been saying that this economy is going to be successful on 3 main ministries: agriculture, trade and industries, and then the finance, because you need to regulate how resources are being made. With these particular 3 ministries doing their work and government supporting them and the Ghanaian people supporting them, this country will be out of the woods. We need probably maybe a long term or a medium term, but if we're able to get our industries right, if we are able to get our agriculture right, all our problems will be solved. We will not have issue about, of course, external shocks will always be there, but we'll be able to sustain our growth for a very long time. And that is the focus of this particular government. It's just unfortunate that all the gains we've made have actually been eroded by external events, but we must as well be ready to support the government do that. Mr. Hagan mentioned about the issue about e-levy, that
you are still taking it back to Parliament. You are hoping it will be passed.
We are hoping that it will be passed, but
okay.
I agree that we need to have sovereignty in the war in the towers of Parliament. We need to all come back to understand that, okay, we need it. 1.75, we disagree. 1.5, we agree, we disagree. What is the rate we all agree, so that we can be able to make this revenue? The MPs themselves are suffering from this particular problem. If you ask Mr. Hager, he will tell you bluntly that.
But it's your government that hasn't mobilized its people.
Of course.
To come and vote. Mobilize your people
Mr.
to come and vote.
If he will admit, members of Parliament, mobilize
your people to come and vote. Well, that's when we have to
admit that at the control. They complain because if we don't have enough revenue, some of them have interim parent certificate. They are contractors. They are supposed to do their roles in their constituencies. Are lying down there. They want them to be paid.
Okay.
But if we don't have the revenue, it will be difficult.
All right. So thank you very much, Dr. Kabir, and many thanks to all of you. Many thanks to Dr. Kabir Mahama. Many thanks to Professor Mauto. Many thanks to the Honorable Ricketts Hagan. Many thanks to Edgar Redu joining us on Zoom. I'm Jifa Bampo. Thanks to all of you for your messages. Thanks to the entire production team. We are back next week with another interesting edition. Up next is Warm Up Plus.